We all remember the absolute mayhem that happened in the second wave of COVID in the country, with people running around from one hospital to another looking for beds with oxygen, with ventilators, and many people collapsing on the way. We also remember getting up every morning and hearing depressing news about hospitals running out of oxygen and people losing their lives. But when the parliament was asking questions about the number of deaths due to oxygen shortage, the response from the government was that they had no information about anyone dying due to lack of oxygen. This was not the only thing where the government said they had no information. When asked about the number of migrant workers who died while walking back during lockdowns, the government said they had no information. The government said it has no information on the unemployment in the country that we are facing. Also, no information is available about the consumer expenditure index or about the deaths of manual scavengers in the country. So essentially, wherever information has been asked, the government has been questioned about things that are inconvenient for the government to respond to, the response has been there is no information. No information basically means no accountability. If I have to reimagine India, I would imagine a country where the state is accountable, where those in power are answerable to the people of the country. For that to happen, at least three things have to take place. First, every person, the last person on the street, has to be empowered to ask questions from those in power. The second is that those who ask questions, those who raise dissenting voices, have to be able to do so without fear of their voices being crushed, of violence and attacks unleashed against them. And finally, when people question, when people ask for answers and they file complaints, they expose wrongdoing, corruption, human rights excesses, there must be systems and institutions that take action, that investigate and bring those who are not functioning properly to book. Now, if we look at our country, in 2005, a very powerful right to information law was brought in, and it was brought in because of a strong people's movement, a movement that involved citizens and people from across the country, from slums in urban areas to villages to remote areas in our country. People came together and asked for a strong right to information legislation. The law has also been used very vibrantly. More than 60 lakh people file RTI applications every year in our country. It's the highest anywhere globally. And they are asking for information from their very basic rights like rations, pensions, information about education of their children in government schools, medicines in hospitals, to questioning the highest offices of the land. So people have asked about big ticket corruption. They've exposed it, the Adarsh scam, the Vyapam scam, the Rafale deal. They have filed RTI applications to access information. People have also asked the judges of the higher judiciary, the Supreme Court, the High Court, about their assets and liabilities to see whether there is any judicial corruption. Information has been asked about the educational qualifications of our Prime Minister when people wanted to verify whether he's in fact done the education and achieved what he has said in his affidavit. So information has been sought widely in the country. But much needed to be done. So when in 2014, the BJP came to power on the plank of anti-corruption, promising a more transparent, accountable governance, the hope was that the one instrument that empowers people to be able to hold the government transparent and accountable, the Right to Information Act, would be fortified, it would be strengthened. But what we have seen in the last 7.5 years is a systematic dismantling of the Right to Information regime in our country. We've seen how governments have just put up their hands and said, we just don't have data. They've stopped maintaining basic information. No information means no right to information for the people. Again, we've seen how the government has brought in various schemes, various systems which have secrecy inbuilt into them. We all know that the fountainhead of corruption in our country has been political party funding. But instead of ensuring that there was greater transparency in political party funding, the government brought in electoral bonds. The electoral bond scheme basically opens the floodgates of anonymous, unlimited donations to political parties from people and organizations within the country and even outside the country, without people getting to know, without voters getting to know who is giving the money and to whom. Now, this is so dangerous because we know that in a democracy, in any system, the political parties form governments eventually when they win. And political parties are obviously going to work for the benefit of those who fund them. So there is a very deep interest in a democracy for citizens to know who is funding which party. So if I want to know whether the Ambanis, the Adanis, the Tatas, the Monsantos are funding any political party, I would want to be able to cast my vote in an informed manner. But what the electoral bond schemes has done is that it has disempowered citizens from knowing who is funding political parties. So we go, in a sense, blindfolded to vote in the elections. And we have had, in the last 3 years since the electoral bond scheme was brought in, several states going to elections. We've even had a general election where the Bharatiya Janata Party, which has received more than 70% of the electoral bonds money so far, has won elections. Again, the PM Cares Fund. We were told that this fund is being set up to help people get through the COVID crisis during this disaster time. But nobody is being told how much money is coming into the PM Cares funds, from where, who is donating the money, where the money is going. We are told, of course, very broad strokes, like there is some money being sent for ventilators, but then ventilators don't work, people die of hypoxia, and when courts ask, they are told, no, this fund was not from the PM Cares. So there is this whole secrecy which is being propagated by our government, by the system at the moment. And when people don't get information, under the mechanism, the transparency regime, there are supposed to be information commissions that are supposed to function on behalf of the people to make sure that governments give information, direct them to disclose information even if it is inconvenient for them to give the information. But what we have seen is that instead of empowering these information commissions and allowing them and having a framework where they can function autonomously, independently, their independence is being undermined. First of all, not a single information commissioner has been appointed to the Central Information Commission since 2014 without people going to courts. So there are vacancies that come up in the Information Commission and no appointments are made. The posts are lying vacant, pendency keeps going up, and people have to keep waiting with their appeals and complaints and not get their right to information. Again, there was a law that was amended, the RTI law was amended very recently, where the government changed the provision of the RTI law in which the salaries, the terms of reference and the time period for which appointments of information commissioners are made were fixed earlier in the law, but now the government controls them. So essentially, the information commissioners are forever worried that if they were to direct information disclosure that the central government is not happy about, their pensions, their salaries, their terms of reference could be harmed. So what we are seeing is a direct attack on people's right to information. We need a situation, we need a country where there is free flow of information, where governments are held accountable, where they maintain information, that information is disseminated to people, it is disseminated proactively by governments. Information that is in public interest is given not just in technical forms, not just online, but in offline modes, in local languages, so that every citizen in the country can participate. Every citizen in the country can know that if there is a law passed in the parliament, what are the basis for which the law has been brought in, what is the basic structure of the law beforehand, so that they may participate meaningfully. They can be pre-legislative consultation. We need a system where if the governments don't share information, they are held to account. Again, if we look at what happens to those who question. In the state of Madhya Pradesh, just outside Bhopal, a few years ago, there were extrajudicial killings. People asked questions, and one of the senior union cabinet ministers went on record to say, there is a terrible culture that has set into the country, the culture of questioning. Now, if we examine this statement, it really belies a very problematic mindset, where in a democracy, people should have the right to question everything because everything is happening in their names on their behalf. We are being told that the culture of questioning is problematic. And we are seeing this permeate itself across society, where those who question, those who dissent, who demand answers are being attacked. There is violence against them. People are being killed for asking questions that are inconvenient, for exposing wrongdoing. There are people, more than 85 people have been killed in our country simply for filing RTI applications and exposing corruption and human rights excesses. We know how people who are raising their voice and questioning unconstitutional acts are being targeted. There are false cases against them under draconian laws like the UAPA, like the NSA. They are labeled anti-national, constantly being called urban Naxals, and that is how atmosphere of fear and intimidation is being created against those who raise questions. What we need is an environment in our country. We need space for people to openly question and participate, for people to assert themselves, have the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, and the freedom to ask. And that is only possible when there are governments that recognize that they have been elected by by citizens in our country to simply work on their behalf. They are willing to be transparent, and there have to be mechanisms and systems like the Whistleblowers Protection Act, which protects people who ask questions. The Whistleblowers Protection Law was passed in 2014. Till date, it has not been operationalized because the government has refused point blank to make and promulgate rules to operationalize the Whistleblowers Protection Act. So despite the law being on the statute book, it is absolutely useless for people who are asking questions and are dissenting voices. Finally, in order to be able to hold governments accountable, citizens need a system where they can go to, where they can complain, they can raise questions and take their grievances and their cases against wrongdoing by the governments. We don't need a system where governments constantly pat themselves on the back and say they are not corrupt, say that their corruption has gone down, say there is no wrongdoing happening, but the systems, the institutions that are supposed to do oversight, who are supposed to hold the government accountable, don't function. So we need an effective grievance redress law, a mechanism by which when people who don't get their basic rights file a complaint, that complaint doesn't just go into a black hole. That complaint is acted upon in a time-bound manner and people's problems are redressed. They get their basic rights, their basic entitlements. We need a place, an institution which is independent and empowered to look into cases of corruption and human rights excesses. The Lokpal law was brought in, but we know how appointments are being made to the Lokpal, to the Enforcement Directorate, the ED, the CBI, where basically people who are acolytes of governments are brought in and who are sitting to raid people's homes who ask questions, to act against citizens who dissent, and not investigate and act against government officials or the state actors who need to be held accountable. So we need institutions, we need a judiciary that acts on behalf of the people in our democracy. So I imagine an India where there is real participatory democracy, not just all of us going once in 5 years to vote and elect rulers who are not accountable to us, the people.